Hello, I'm Maciej Mikos and you're watching World Talks. Despite the British Prime Minister Keir Starmer taking the responsibility for his party's poor performance in the last week's local elections across the UK, he does not intend to leave office. And to talk about the recent tensions within the UK's ruling party, we're joined by political scientist Professor Melanie Sully. Good evening.
Yeah, good evening.
So, can Keir Starmer survive the mounting pressure from his fellow Labour MPs after the party's disastrous, that's the name to use here, the local election results, right?
Yeah, the results were disastrous, and a lot of people blamed Keir Starmer himself because they see that he is the problem. I mean, the problem goes a lot deeper, but he takes responsibility for a lot of decisions and a lot of things that where he had not decided. You know, he seems to dither around a lot. It's very, very unpopular. This was what people mentioned who were voting last week. And the Labour Party since then has been really in panic and wondering what to do. One idea is that they have a new leader. And a lot in his own parliamentary party have called for this. But he said today, actually, basically, I'm not going anywhere. But then they all say that at the beginning. And at the end, it really becomes unsustainable to govern, to pass legislation, if you don't have enough of your members of parliament behind you.
So how likely is it that he will be replaced in the end?
Oh, I think that's very likely. The question is, you know, when is he going to realise that he can't stay there? What kind of process is going to be initiated? Where will the parliamentary party go to support an alternative leader? What factions within the party will emerge? There's left, right, and there's lots of left factions that are arguing between them. And at the moment, it's not really clear what that path may be, but I think it's quite clear that it's not possible under these circumstances to carry on for very long. Tomorrow we have an opening of the new parliamentary session. The King will present a programme written by the government, and you know, if he can't get that through Parliament, there's usually a collapse of the government. I think he will get that majority, but with so many in his party against the positions that he has been taken in domestic policy, then as the parliamentary session goes on, he will find there's a lot of rebels, and I think it would be very uncomfortable for him. And in the end, some of his cabinet ministers may say, look, we need to do this, and there could be a timetable in which you lay out how a leader, an alternative leader, could be elected, and we'll see if that actually transpires. But I think everybody has agreed, apart from him, obviously, that he can't last that long.
Professor, talking about his internal opposition, who do you think could replace him?
Well, there are three candidates that are often named. One is the current Health Secretary, who has, in the past, very close relations with Peter Mandelson, who was the former ambassador, UK ambassador to US that Starmer appointed, and then he had to resign rather disgracefully because he'd had very close relations with the paedophile Epstein and had not come clean on this. That would be against him, but he is in cabinet, he's got experience. He's on the right of the party. Then there is a woman, Angela Rayner. She was Deputy Prime Minister, but had to leave cabinet because she had some tax problems, and she's trying to clear up them before she could sort of really come back in any shape or form. But she is in Parliament. And there's a third candidate on the left who is very popular, actually, but he's not in Parliament. And to enter this race, you have to be a member of Parliament. And to do that, he would have to contest a parliamentary seat. That could take weeks. And win it. And then in Parliament would have to mount his leadership campaign. Or there could be a compromise candidate between left and right. Talk is of Ed Miliband, who once before led the party, but led the party to defeat, it must be said, in an election. So basically they're at 6s and 7s at the moment. And that's the thing which is also keeping Keir Starmer in Downing Street, that there's no obvious successor. Once we had Theresa May, who was a very unpopular prime minister, but Boris Johnson was very popular. So it was quite obvious, that he was going to replace her, and so it could be done a little bit more quickly. This time, the government seems completely paralyzed.
Professor, you said that a string of bad decisions led to this election result. Now, leader of the Greens, Zach Polański, says that the two-party politics is, quote, dead and buried. Well, could he be right about it, or is what happened now a sort of a freakish phenomenon that will not repeat in parliamentary elections?
Well, I think for some time it's been clear that not just the Greens, but also the Reform on the right under Nigel Farage, a sort of Brexit man, have challenged the two-party system. And that the main two parties, the Conservatives and the Labour Party, have not managed to get their message across to people. People feel that they have been deserted by them, that they've not been listened by them. And also we have in Scotland, the Scottish nationalists won there, and in the Welsh nationalists won, and Labour's always held that. So we don't just have left-right politics that are undermining the old two-party system, but also a nationalistic fragmentation of the United Kingdom, which is also a threat and a challenge to anybody, really, who's going to be in Downing Street.
Now, lastly, I'd like to ask you about the political stability of the country, because now there are some tensions within the ruling party. How will it affect the economy, investors' confidence, and will Britain's standing among its allies in Europe?
Well, uncertainty is never good for the markets. We have the war in Iran. Britain is in a very vulnerable economic situation, even at the best of times. But this is also something which is brewing for the future, whether there will be enough petrol or whatever, and whether energy prices soar. These are all great uncertainties, not just for Starmer, but for anybody. And the uncertainty of who's going to be in Downing Street, of course, is a problem. Not just because of the business investment, but also when the Prime Minister goes on the international stage, who's going to do negotiations with him, because they know if he says, oh yes, we'll do that, it could be next week, it's no thank you from another Prime Minister. So this is a complete stagnation, and it's not really very helpful to the country at all.
And, it's looking particularly bad from Poland's perspective, right? I mean, from Poland's and Ukraine's perspective. Would you agree?
Well, I think most of the possible successors in the question of supporting Ukraine have been very consistent. And there's a consensus across the parties, actually, that this support will continue. I don't see that as a particular problem. The main problems have been in domestic areas. And in fact, Keir Starmer has been criticised far too much for spending too much time abroad. But I don't think the foreign policy would change seismically with a new leader, particularly in respect to Ukraine.
Melanie Sully, political scientist, professor of political science, was our guest this afternoon. Thank you very much, Professor.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching, and stay with us for more interviews here on TVP World.